So our special guest this week is Lesley Gracie from Hendricks Gin. Master Distiller, Master Blender. What's your official title over there, Lesley?
Master Distiller.
Master Distiller of one of what has become one of the most popular gin brands in the world, certainly a wildly popular gin here at Binny's. One of the first gins I really got into when I started drinking gin quite a while ago at this point.
Well, strong argument that it's the gin that started the craft, what we would consider the current modern craft gin movement.
Yes.
And so you've built this beautiful now, I guess we're calling it a gin palace there out in Girvan, Scotland, where you're joining us today. So you want to give us a little background on what brought you to your position as this master of gin?
Well, it sort of started, I've been with William Grant & Sons now for 32 years. And I was originally came into the company, I have a chemistry degree, and I was working in the technical function. But the job I had before I started with William Grant was with a pharmaceutical company in the research and development area. And some of the new drugs that we were producing at the time were pretty rough to taste. And because they weren't pleasant, we wouldn't have got people to actually take the drugs. So we used to do a lot of background work in terms of flavour enhancement, flavour masking, that kind of thing. Then I moved up to Scotland with the William Grant, and because I'd done a lot of flavour work beforehand, I kind of moved over into the new liquid development side. And then back in 1999, Charlie Gordon, the late life president of William Grant, decided that he wanted a new gin. Now this was a bit of a surprise to everybody, because gin in 1999 was really not doing anything at all. There would be sort of 4 or 5 bottles behind the screen, behind the bar, and that was it really. But he wanted a new gin, but he also wanted us to use 2 stills that he bought back in 1966 at an auction down in London, and he wanted me to use both of these stills. Now these are 2 totally different stills. One is a very small pot still, much like you would see in the Scotch whisky industry, and the other one is a Carter head still, which operates in a totally different way to a pot still. And he wanted me to use both of these stills. Both very precious stills, and as I say to everybody that listens, the Bennett still that he bought was actually built in 1860. It's a beautiful little still, and I say to everybody, when I retire, I'm taking it with me. It's been in my garage. I've measured the garage. It's going to fit in just fine. The neighbours don't seem to mind, so when I retire, they'll come in one morning and the Bennett still will have gone. It's in my garage.
And are you still using those stills?
Oh yes. So
because you've recently switched locations on the facility. For people that haven't seen it, Girvan is a massive facility, one of the larger grain producers in all of Scotland. And so there's a lot going on that site. Can you kind of, because originally when Hendricks was produced, it's almost like being on a large petrochemical plant, and then you open a wee door and there it is.
Yeah, that's true. Yes, back in 2018, we moved into this new facility, and where I am at the moment is the bar. Every distillery should have its own bar, and this is ours. As you can see from the bottles on the back bar, Hendricks is the house gin here. So we have 1 or 2 bottles behind the bar. So, yeah, and this is where we do a lot of VIP visits, and it's just an amazing place. If you get the chance to go onto the website and have a look at the different areas within the distillery, it's just a beautiful place, absolutely beautiful.
The last time Brett and I were there actually is when where you're standing was under construction, and so we saw some old stills like that were in a shed temporarily or something while they built that beautiful new gin palace. So since then, when I was there last, there was one Hendricks. There was that classic Hendricks that everybody knows and loves with the hint of cucumber and rose. And you've really kind of turned the innovation train on the last couple of years here with some interesting new things. How long have you been experimenting with that twist on that classic Hendricks formula? I can't imagine this was just a 2019 thing there. All of a sudden they started letting you loose and doing all this new stuff. Did it take some convincing to let the accountants let you start doing these more interesting projects?
No, not really. I mean, it is the Hendricks, the original Hendricks is now 20 years old. Mm-hmm. And because we hadn't launched a second one for quite a while, we were still doing lots of innovation in the background. And I don't know whether you'll be able to see these bottles very well, but in the early 2000s, we made a quinine cordial. And the idea was that you would take Hendricks, the quinine cordial, the quinine cordial has got lots of flavors in there as well. Mm-hmm. And it was built, the flavor profile of that was so that when you took Hendricks, added the quinine cordial and soda water, it made the perfect Hendricks and tonic because the flavors were built to mesh together. And we did that in the early 2000s, and we took it out to several bars that had been with Hendricks right from the start and gave it to the bartenders and said, what you're supposed to do, Hendricks, this Battersea cordial here, soda water makes the perfect Hendricks and tonic. And a few weeks later, when the brand ambassadors went back to those bars and said, so how did the Hendricks and tonic, go with the Battersea? And they were like, we didn't use it for that. We made this cocktail, that cocktail. So basically they've done completely the opposite of what we asked them to do. But hey, that's bartenders for you.
Yeah, they're bartenders, of course.
To be expected with bartenders.
Based on the feedback for this, we produced the Quinatum. Now, you may have seen this. This was, again, was just a point of sale for people that had been with Hendricks right from the beginning. And it's the next version of the Battersea. So the flavor's been changed slightly, but not much. And again, the idea is you take the Quinatum, you take Hendricks and soda water to make the perfect Hendricks and tonic. But this is an amazing liquid. It really has a lot of flavor depth to it, and it is a really nice liquid. Again, never been sold, it's only been given to bars as something for them to use. So when we came to develop our next actual launch of Hendricks, then because we've been playing around with the quinine in the cordial, it made perfect sense to us to produce the Orbium. So this was the next iteration of Hendricks, and this has already got the quinine added into it and other things as well. And so this, again, sidestepped the gin category completely, the same as Hendricks did when it first started. And with it being a quininated gin, it gives you a lot more options for different types of cocktails as well. As I say, I don't make cocktails, that's way outside my skill set. I just drink them for the brand ambassadors. They make them for me, which is good. I quite like that. Seems a reasonable way to do it. So that was our next iteration, which is the Orbium. And it's called Orbium because if you've not already sussed this, I'm a really weird character, okay? Even my granddaughter tells me I'm seriously weird. So, gotta go with that. But when I drink, or taste a drink, I see it in terms of a shape. And for me, the Hendricks is a classic round shape. And we have the Bennett distillation in the middle, and the Carter head distillate kind of forms a halo around it to make this round shape. And because I always talk about this round, when it came to naming this one, they called it Orbium because of the round for all. So, but it's an amazing liquid.
So when you're introducing these new botanicals, how much time are you able to experiment and just bring new things in and distill with them in isolation, distill with them on the formula? How much opportunity do you have? Because for people who haven't seen it, you're getting a lot of gin. I mean, Hendricks is not a small brand anymore. And given the equipment you have, you're actually getting a lot of outturn. So where do these experiments start? Do you have an idea, I want to try this? are you constantly cycling through different things, or are they things that you've tried and have been put on the back burner and then you've just decided to bring back in and combine with other things? I mean, what's the process you go through?
I'm always experimenting with things. Lots and lots of different botanicals that I try, and it's just, I'm given as much time as I want. William Grant's is still a family-owned business, so I'm just allowed to play. They've even given me a new lab in the distillery, and they just allow me to play all day, and it's great fun. And also in the distillery, I have 2 big greenhouses, 2 hot houses, one of which is set up like a tropical greenhouse, and one which is set up like a Mediterranean greenhouse. So that allows me to grow different botanicals in there, trial them, and then if we like them, then I can source it commercially. In my greenhouses, I won't be able to do enough. But I can just play all of the time. And I have a cupboard which is called our Cabinet of Curiosities, and there's all sorts of weird and wonderful things in there. So, yep, I just get to play all of it. I've got a great job. Don't tell everybody because they'll all want it, but it's a great job.
So speaking of, I guess, some of those botanicals and stuff, our first question was, which garnish goes best with a Hendricks gin and tonic? I feel like the classic cucumber slice is the expected answer. Do you have something that you've used that you feel really amps that kind of basic gin cocktail up?
For Hendricks, I like the cucumber because it lifts up the cucumber that's in the gin, but it also picks up and lifts up the green elements that we've got in there, and it complements the flowers because again we've got the rose in there as well. So it complements everything perfectly because you've got all of the character coming through, and it just lifts everything up and just maintains that round flavour. I never put anything personally, anything other than cucumber into Hendrick.
What did you, since it was very unique, I think, at least commercially, to talk about it, that cucumber became such an important part. What led to that when you were developing the product originally, or how did that end up being a front runner in the final product? Because other people have used it, but never to the level that you have.
No. That again was down to Charlie Gordon when he first started talking about his new gin. The gins that were available at the time were pretty sort of standard, not much character to them. And one of his requests when we started was he wanted a gin that had a lot of depth and character to it. And then the other things he came up with was sort of 1999 gin still had very kind of British connotations to it. And what is more British than rose gardens and cucumber sandwiches? So he was wanting the rose and cucumber in the gin. And we, as you well know, we add our rose and cucumber after our 2 distillates have been put together, purely and simply because if you put heat onto a cucumber, it immediately goes black, floppy, and smells horrible. And despite the fact that he wanted them in the stills themselves, I did figure out a way whereby I could get them into the stills, but they weren't truly in the distillation. And anybody that had any background knowledge on, well, say cucumbers and distillation would have realized they'd started digging with the questions that it wasn't truly in the distillation. So we had the conversation with Charlie and said, you know, we can do it, but it's not quite right. And true to form, Charlie Gordon, his mantra was always, if we're going to do something, we're going to do it properly. Therefore, he just said, right, we'll add it afterwards. That means that it's not a London dry gin. It means it's a distilled gin, but it gave us the flavour character that we wanted. And that was the important thing to him. It's the same across every one of William Grant's brands. Yeah, has to be done properly, has to be done right. And so that was what we did.
Now, on that, we got another question here from Edward, asks if you sample other gins and compare those other products with the gins that you manufacture. And on that note, I would ask if you have another gin that you really like that isn't a Hendricks gin.
One of the other gins that I really like is Tanqueray 10. I think that's a nice gin.
Yeah.
I like that one.
Yeah, it's probably my favorite gin of all time as far as those kind of a classic big brand gin goes. I like the higher proof, and I like it really holds up well in a cocktail.
Yeah, it's good gin. I do like that one.
So I noticed when I was pouring samples out here, so I've got the standard Hendricks, the MidSummer, and the Orbium here. And the standard Hendricks is 44% alcohol, but the Orbium and the MidSummer are very slightly less. Was there a reason behind that, or was that a tax thing or something?
What we did was for the original Hendricks, it's 44% in the US, but we have it at 41.4.
What a shame.
So we have a slightly different strength. But when we moved to the Orbium, the MidSummer, and the two new gins, they are all at 43.4. So we kind of come into almost the middle between them. So everybody gets the same strength for the Orbium and the MidSummer.
Okay.
So just standardized on 43.4.
So you touched on Orbium earlier and called it a quininated gin. What else was anything else changed with that besides that shot of additional quinine, or did you have to balance other botanicals to then not be totally overwhelmed with that?
Yes, I put other things into it. Just because quinine has got that bitterness in there, then we've added other things that lifts that bitterness up. So you still get the bitterness from the quinine, but because I've balanced it off with other flavors, it just lifts it up. So it's still got that round flavor for me. And I think it's an amazing gin. I drink this, just take it neat, put an ice cube into it and sip it as though it was a single malt. And I like it like that.
I like that the clean bitterness is there enough that it even as just a digestive after a nice meal, this is a nice gin for that. And it doesn't.
Yeah, it's a good,
totally
the wormwood
scream
kind
that it
of,
needs cocktail.
the wormwood is actually a nice complement. I would imagine it was difficult working with wormwood because wormwood can be intense and overpowering if you're not very, very careful.
Yeah, that's true. Yes. Yeah. It's a really interesting flavor. You've got the bitterness, but you've got other elements in there as well. It's a really interesting flavor, particularly when you get it into the gin as well, because it changes everything slightly. But it's a good gin. Good gin.
Yeah, it's got a very nice woodsy bitterness to it. Almost, tasting it blind, you might almost think it's like a gentian root or something like that. Yeah. So the other one, I mean, it being the middle of the summer here at this point, you want to talk about MidSummer a bit and what was so different about that and if you had did you have a particular cocktail in mind or use for that in mind when you were creating that?
No, the MidSummer has got a really different story to it. I started this back in 2017 when our then global brand ambassador, Duncan McCrae, was getting married. And I decided I would do him 6 bottles of gin for his wedding. Okay? And I found out what his wife was having in her wedding bouquet. And they'd met on MidSummer evening and they were getting married very close to MidSummer evening as well. And so I put lots of things into here that you would attribute to the MidSummer. And I did 6 bottles for his wedding, as I say, and they went. And then when we were looking for liquids, what we had and sort of developed already, and I pulled this one out of the cupboard and people tried it and they loved it. And I had to do a couple of little tweaks just to make it legal. But, and that is what MidSummer is. It was actually Duncan's wedding gin. And I really struggle to call it MidSummer Solstice. I always want to call it Duncan's wedding gin. So I said to the brand ambassadors and all of them that if from now on, if they're getting married, they're getting 6 bottles of Gerben tap water. They're not getting a new gin.
Gerben tap water. It's pretty clean tap water, I assume, though.
Yeah.
What this is I mean, without knowing the story behind it, it's still just immediately a pretty intensely floral gin. But I like that it's floral without being real perfumey, which I think a lot of gins kind of err on that side of the spectrum when it comes to botanicals.
Yeah.
What you mentioned flowers specifically. What was in there that gives it that floral character? Which flowers?
You've got a combination of flowers in there. One of them, of course, is neroli from orange blossom, because she was having orange blossom in a bouquet. But we've got other things sort of sitting in there that just keeps it so that when you actually nose it, you've still got the top. The first thing you smell is the juniper, and then you get everything else. Because I'm afraid I'm a bit of a stickler for the definition of gin.
Well,
it should be.
There's a definition for a reason, right? And it has to be juniper forward.
For me, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I sit on the panel for the International Spirits Competition for gin, which we've only done in the last sort of 2 or 3 weeks. And some of the gins that were coming into that, they're not gin, you know. Some of them are flavored vodkas. Some of them very nice flavored vodkas, but juniper's just not.
But if
there.
it's all lemon, if it's all citrus peel and neutral alcohol, it's not a gin, right?
Yeah.
Well, and you can do both. I mean, you've managed, because we've talked about the juniper because it has to be present. We've talked about the floral aspect, but on the finish, in the mid of the mouth, in the back of the mouth, there you're still getting like citrus pith, which is again, like Pat said, it's not overly flowery, and there's a certain dryness that's more of a citrus pithy dryness rather than like dried flower petals. So.
Yeah,
Which is, and then how do you, now when you do that, how do you go separating? Do you have to go flower by flower depending upon whether you steep or whether you put it in a basket? I mean, and how much experiment does it take to figure out the right way to use everything?
You kind of sort of get experienced with it, and you would use a certain technique for the brighter things like the citrus and the floral, whereas you would use a different technique for the deeper character. And it's getting that balance, but it kind of comes with sort of practice, really, I think. Oh, I hope.
Right.
But yeah, and because our two stills operate in such a different way, that the Bennett still operates like a little pot still, whereas in the Carter head still, all of our dry botanicals go into the flavour basket up at the top of the still. And so the way that the stills operate means that the botanicals in the basket see a much higher alcoholic strength than they do in the Bennett still. So you get different extraction, and it's knowing at which point you put the different things. That it's just practice, I think, really.
So, and then you could use a single botanical both ways then. I mean, is that common to you? So it's like, I want to extract this element, so it's going to be steeped, and I want this part of it. So you could do both at the same time. You're not just limited to using them only one way.
No, because we put the two distillates together, then we fetch the two of them, so the flavors from both sides. So yeah.
Is there a particular botanical that you feel has a pretty wild variance in which type of still it gets run through?
You see a big difference, say, in things like angelica root and coriander. You'll see a big difference. If you put coriander into a Carter head still, you get much more of the citrus character coming than you do if you do it in the Bennett still. You get like the nice deep notes from the pot still, but you get the bright citrus character coming through a bit more in the Carter head.
That's interesting that you're taking this kind of blender's approach to making gin, where I think a lot of times when people think gin, it's like, okay, you have a still, whether it is a column still or a pot still, and you have a gin basket, and you come up with some kind of arbitrary blend of botanicals, and you stuff them in the gin basket, and you turn on the still and call it a day. And you have these two, very different distillates with, even within those distillates, different results from these botanicals that you then marry together, and to create a product so consistently that is, such a wide seller across the world. I think it's pretty, you know, it really speaks volumes to the level of skill being made to make this gin. I think it's really impressive, Leslie.
We take really great care with all of our ingredients. All our botanicals, we source them through brokers that would actually go to specific farms as the harvest is coming up. They'll take a sample just before the harvest in, send it over to us, and we check it to make sure it's giving us what we want, because every year it changes slightly. And so we'll test that sample. If we like it, then he'll buy that harvest on our behalf and then send us another sample from the whole harvest, and we check it again. And then when the material is delivered into the distillery, we check it again before distillation. So every single botanical is checked 3 times at least before it gets anywhere near our stills. So we are absolutely sure that we've got absolute consistency across all of the ingredients before we even start to use them. So again, back to Charlie's mantra, if we're going to do it, we're going to do it properly.
So does that cause, if there's a slight variance, does that cause you to have to rebalance everything periodically?
No, because we buy through the broker who visits various farms, then we will always have sufficient, we've got enough stock, or virtually enough stock, of all of our botanicals to last us until the next harvest. So say if this year's harvest of one particular botanical is a disaster and we can't get any, I've got enough in stock to allow us to produce until the next harvest is due. And we make sure we've got that, so we're okay.
A couple more questions came in here. Greg asked if there's a new addition to your garden that has inspired you.
Yes, there's some interesting things in my hothouses. My favourite one, I think, was last year. I managed to get bananas on 3 trees in the tropical house. And those bananas were amazing. They must have been the first ever bananas grown in the southwest of Scotland. They were amazing, but I'm afraid we ate them all. So I didn't really want to put it in the gin, but we just had them in the greenhouse just to see if they would grow. But we've got all sorts of things in there. We've got different types of peppers. I've got mangoes. I've got pineapple. I've got all sorts of things growing in there. So
wow.
It's amazing. I mean, the
tropical fruit where you know, in the home of like curling stones and things. You wouldn't exactly expect that.
Yeah, it's a little bit odd, I have to say.
And then Annette and Jim are asking also if you ever drink the gins neat or if you only enjoy them in cocktails.
For me, I like Hendricks with the original Hendricks. I always drink it with elderflower cordial and soda water as a long drink. Again, cucumber as the garnish. The Orbium, I really like it, as I say, on its own with an ice cube, a different drinking occasion. And the MidSummer, the brand ambassadors do this with sparkling wine and tonic, and it is amazing, I have to say. But again, it's nice, even if you do it with just tonic, it is really versatile. So I just usually drink it how the brand ambassadors give me it.
And then which one do you get the most requests to send to Dustin for the family to drink?
Oh, at the moment, we're getting a lot of press for the MidSummer because I think it is so different to the original Hendricks. But I mean, the volumes on the original Hendricks just keep going up and up and up year on year. So it's just unbelievable how much we make these days.
Leslie, if you were going to make a Negroni with one of these gins, which one would you make? And I don't know if, we have a lot of guys with glasses that look like mine who wear tight pants in the States here who love a good Negroni. I don't know if it's really a popular drink over in the UK yet or not.
For me, I would use the Orbium for that.
I was going to suggest the same thing. I think it's probably the one with the guts that really holds up to a vermouth and a bitter, an additional
Well,
bitter.
and the wormwood and everything complements the bitter aperitivos.
Yeah,
very cool. So what else? I guess we have to try to get you to tease what's coming up next there for Hendricks. I've heard through some sales and marketing types that, you know, as midsummer goes away, there's going to be something else coming up this winter.
Yep, there is indeed. We have this one here, which is called the Luna. I don't know if you've seen this bottle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this is an interesting gin as well. I really like my garden, and when it's one of these nice summer evenings and you can sit out, I've got a lot of flowers in the garden that at night give off, you know, an amazing scent, an amazing aroma, and I really like that. I think it's such a relaxing thing to sit in amongst your garden at, you know, sort of quite late at night. And so this one is built to kind of replicate that kind of feeling. So it's got, you know, plenty of depth and complexity in it, but it's also got a slight floral aroma to it, but totally different to the, I nearly said the wedding gin there, totally different to midsummer, totally different. And this one, I would put ginger with it because I've got some ginger in here. And so if you get ginger ale in with this one, it really lifts it as well. So that's a nice gin. Unfortunately, the situation we're in at the moment with this pandemic has put everything on hold. So we have the Luna gin, and we also have this one here, which will be a GTR release, which is the Hendricks Amazonia. Now, this is based on a trip back in 2013. The company decided that it would be a good idea to send me to southwest Venezuela to look for new botanicals. We'd met a guy called Charles Brewer Carriers, a Venezuelan guy who is just like Indiana Jones. And we were talking to him at an event in Philadelphia and about flavors and different plants and things. And he said, if you want different flavors, come to my back garden, which is what he calls Venezuela. So we ended up going to in the back of beyond in Venezuela and we stayed with a tribe that had only been non-nomadic for about 3 generations. Wow. So they had nothing. But the one thing they did have, which we don't have anymore, is community spirit. If one of the guys had managed to catch a wild boar, the whole village ate it, rather than like we're a bit like, it's mine and I'm having it and nobody else is. Totally different. I mean, they had virtually nothing, but we stayed with them for 10 nights and days, and I managed to get a 10-litre still out into the jungle with me, and some alcohol. Please don't ask how, okay? And so we're looking at all different plants that there were, you know, around all the different terrains, where there was the mountains and there was the jungle and there was savannas and everything. We were looking at different things that I've never seen before, and eventually came across a particular plant which the Indians themselves call scorpion tail, because the flower calyx tails over like scorpion tail. And this particular plant, when you pull the leaves off, rub it in your hands and smelt it, you got the green elements, the spice element, and the floral element coming up. And we looked at all sorts of different things, but this particular distillate that I did really fitted in with Hendricks because we have those 3 elements in Hendricks. We've got the green, we've got the floral, and we've got the spicy character as well. So I managed to do about 8.5 litres of this distillate in the jungle, which was quite sort of amusing really, because the tribe that we were staying with was still a very male-dominated society. And when I was running the still, I had to keep getting cold water from the river to keep the condenser cool. And I was saying to one of the guys that was with us, "Hey, do me a favour, can you go get me some water for the condenser?" Yes, so they would toddle off with the bucket and get some water. But of course, in the tribe, getting water from the river is the women's job. So they were kind of looking at me and looking at him, and there was, you could almost see the light bulb too. She just sent him for water, and he went, interesting.
They're stirring rebellion down there, apparently.
Well, interesting. And had they seen, was there any sort of rudimentary distillation down there? Had this group of people seen distillation before?
No, they do have their own alcohol. They make a kind of beer from manihot roots, and they lay banana leaves over it, and the wild yeast starts to ferment it. So they do have alcohol, but it is a beer type thing. But they use it in a very similar way to we do. If another tribe comes to visit, then the men drink, sit round and tell stories and drink this beer. So they use it very similar way to we do. But I reckon there'll be a suffragette movement.
Men sitting around drinking and telling stories while avoiding doing the actual work seems to be a pretty culturally ubiquitous thing. Yeah.
I couldn't possibly comment. Sorry.
I can't believe you traveled with a 10-liter still. Pontani and I will go to Scotland and bring a few bottles of whiskey and maybe smuggle a haggis back or something, and we feel like we're like the kings of packing and international travel, and you're out there bringing us still into the jungle.
Yep.
Ma'am, whose still is this? Oh, it's mine.
Yeah. No, it's his.
Yeah, I had pimento cheese confiscated by the TSA once on the way back from Kentucky, and I was devastated. I can't imagine having to get a still through airport security.
Yeah. Wow. So
Are you doing anything? Are you doing any experiments? And you probably get asked this a lot, given the fact that the Grants are more known, or the Gordon family and the Grants are more known for Scotch. Are you doing any barrel aging? Have you played around with regular Hendricks barrel aged, or have you tried to develop a gin specifically to spend a little bit of time in wood?
I've tried it. I've tried it in lots of different casks. I've had it in bourbon cask, new bourbon, refill, sherry cask. I've tried it in lots of casks. But to me, aged gin, I'm not very keen on, because to me a gin should be nice and clean. And as soon as you get the wood notes and the tannins and everything, it kind of pulls that down and dampens it down for me. I'm personally not a great fan of aged gin. I know some people do like it, but it just kind of takes the sort of the clean brightness out of a gin for me. But
well, and it's a testament you're not being pressured to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good on there that they're not pressuring you to do it anyway.
No. But we tried it, but it was okay. But
yeah, I'm with you on that. I think all it does is dull the bright complexity for most gins.
Yeah.
It just
especially any kind of floral or citrus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Leslie, this was fantastic. Thank you for sharing all this about all these wonderful gins. There's more to Hendricks than cucumber and rosewater, which I think sometimes as the brand has grown, it's, there's gin everywhere now. I don't have to tell you, it's all over. Gin, I always kind of joke that gin in the UK is kind of how India Pale Ales have become in America, where we have 8,000 people making them and they all kind of taste the same. But gin and tonic culture over there has become so elaborate too, with the big balloon glasses and all the fruits and stuff. And there's something to be said that Hendricks still carries on as a pretty simple drink with that classic cucumber garnish, and it's still as popular as it's ever been. Really amazing.
Yeah. We try to stay true to what we call our Hendricks house style as well. So you've always got the juniper, you've always got a nice depth and complexity to it, but with just, sort of different accents on it. But it's always Hendricks house style, but just slightly different, but it's always Hendricks.
Well, I really loved Orbium. That was one of the great gin surprises of the last few years for me. So I'm really looking forward to trying these new ones, especially the jungle gin. I don't know why you didn't call it jungle gin. I mean, there's still time to change the name. So just saying.
Yes, this one, when you pour it and you leave it in the glass, you know, just in a nosing glass like that, you just leave it for a minute or so and then smell it. That is what the jungle smells like. It's got a totally sort of got that green, fresh character to it, and that's what that smells like.
International vacations are cut off from you, and Hendricks is bringing you the jungle. That's how you got to play it. So.
I thought they were trying to get rid of me actually when they said we're going to Venezuela. Right. I had to check to make sure I'd got a return ticket and they hadn't just given me a single that were going to leave me out.
You got to be careful. Next, they're going to just, you know, they're going to start sending you out of Mongolia and all kinds of places just to try to find weird things. You know, they drink fermented horse milk in Mongolia. That's the big national drink. You might want to have to make a gin out of that next.
Yeah. Nah, don't sound too good.
One of our spirits guys in actually the store that Brett and I are in right now tried it when he was on vacation there last year and said it was not as horrible as you would think it would be. So
all right.
It's on my bucket list for weird alcohols to try, that's for sure. So,
okay.
All right, Leslie, well, thanks again. Really appreciate your time today and breaking down these excellent botanical treats. Everybody else, if you're tuning in weekly, we'll be back next Wednesday with Richard Patterson and the Dalmore Single Malt. And I'm sure he will extol the virtues of sherry cask aging. So, well, thanks a lot, Leslie. It was nice to see you, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks
we'll have you back when we can all taste the Amazonian together.
Okay, then. Thanks very much.
All right.
All right, cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.